Alrighty, let's pick back up on the art of Africa. So again, we have another map here if you'd like to reference back to the PowerPoint just to kind of see where these places are at. There's a lot of diversity of art of the African continent, and it reflects a variety of cultures. So we'll kind of look through several of those and kind of see the key differences there. Something I do want to note at this point, and this applies to the Asian artwork that we looked at before as well, but I think really just some food for thought, I guess. Abstract artwork that we see, such as this piece here, is really common early on. This is done in the 19 or 195 BCE, around there. And this abstract form and this abstract like way of composing is really common then. And I think that especially like from our European canon of artwork that we are known to, kind of follow, we sort of see abstract art as not coming into fruition until like the late 19th, early 20th century, when we start to see artists like Picasso and like Cubist artists, things like that. However, Picasso got his inspiration for his artwork from going to visit African countries and looking and sort of copying the styles that they were using. He brought it back to our Western world, and was very profound and something that no one had ever seen before. But this way of making art has been the same way that African cultures and Asian cultures have done for thousands of years, and never really received the credit for this sort of being the normal thing for them. And it was more so credited to these more European artists that stole from their way of making artwork. So there's just think about that. Think about the sort of similarities there, and just some food for thought. But going back into the lesson, we've got this head from the Nope culture in Nigeria. Some of the earliest types of art forms that we see, they're using terracotta with nearly life-size forms and very vivid, exaggerated, abstracted facial expressions. The Yoruba and the Benin tribes were two very profound tribes around the southwest Nigerian, like what is today Nigeria. Ife is a Yoruba city in southwest Nigeria, and I'm just going to kind of compare and contrast some things between their types of sculpture. This is the male portrait head. They were very skillful in bronze casting, and this is a very thin-walled bronze sculpture, very naturalistic, not quite as abstracted as the one we saw before. While as in the neighboring Benin culture, their bronze casting was somewhat more abstract, still fairly realistic, but a little bit more abstracted than the one before. They're devoted to glorifying the kind, and only royal artisans were allowed to practice the bronze casting technique because of how highly they regarded it. The Yoruba peoples of Nigeria, they created these house posts for a meditation on the idea of support. And those depicted personified characteristics of the support of the community, or characteristics that support the community. This is very similar to what we see as like in what is modern day the United States. We see like totem poles and things like that in our Native American artworks as well, and we'll talk about some of those later on. Very much a simplification of the proportions and the just like the facial expressions in general, but it adds a meaning to the community's support. Mali, Cameroon, and the Congo. This is the Bamana people of Mali. They carved these wooden antelope figurine headdresses, and usually headdresses, things like this, were used for ceremonies, for dances that were, used in ceremonies. I really love these pieces. They're carved out of wood, and they're very almost like weapon-esque, I guess, for how sharp the points are there, and they become almost like a weapon in a way. But very, very ornate, very exaggerated, sort of also telling of the other artwork we've looked at. Cameroon, their head that they depict, or their bust, is even more abstract than the Benin. The separate areas of the headdress defined by different patterns and textures, and it reinterprets, not copies, the human head. So again, this is a very, on the farther end of the spectrum of like abstraction as far as exaggeration, simplifications, all of that. This is the mangaka power figure from the Congo. These are used to house medicinal matters, so they're like little vessels, sort of, and the metal pieces signify the agreement from the civil cases, laws, etc. Like we've talked about before, especially in the craft chapter, Ghana and Angola are highly textile centric. They are a powerhouse, just as like the Chinese are with ceramics, but for textiles, specifically with weaving and embroidery. Many styles that they use are specific to like the needs that they use them for. The kente cloth pattern is worn when something unprecedented happened. This specific one, I believe, is used or worn by Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana when he won the national election for president. Cut pile embroidery too is another very popular technique. It's one of the oldest textile traditions. And traditionally, men weave the cloth using the raffia fibers, and women embroider by lacing the dyed strips. Gender roles are very, very different in this way. Whereas, normally we think about craft as being more of like women's work. But this is not so much the case for non-European countries as well. Men and women both do, the domestic craft like this, and it's not specified by gender. There's no knotting and has very velvety texture and vibrant patterns to it. All right, next we're going to talk about the art of Oceania and Australia. Another map here for us to kind of like tell where those places are at. So we've got Australia right here, and the Pacific islands of Melanesia, Micronesia, and Polynesia are all sort of like adjacent to the, like on the map side here, I guess the east of Australia, all in this like area here. So just thousands of clusters of islands. Their beliefs, they're all a little bit different, but they do share some core sort of factors, which is Earth Mother and Sky Father are sort of our principal gods. They also believe in the idea of mana, or spiritual power in people, places, and things. So sort of like chi for the Chinese. There is little pottery due to the clay shortage of these islands. Tools are made of stone, bone, or shell, and the materials we see a lot are wood, bark, and small plants. Melanesia, this is from the Solomon Islands. It's a wood carving and mask used for rituals. This might be something also that you would see on like the front of a boat. Again, very abstracted, very, exaggerated proportions, that sort of thing. Lots of symbolism. Same thing with this one here. This is the New Ireland bird mask. Strong carved patterns. We see that there is a chicken in the middle here holding snakes that symbolize opposition of sky and earth. Again, lots of symbolism here, probably only used for ceremonial purposes. Micronesia and Polynesia, these are some carvings. They streamline a lot of highly finished products like this. This is supposed to be a female figure of Nakuro Atoll. It has an unusual degree of abstraction, though. It has likely a set of traditional carving rules to it, though, but very abstracted, but there were a lot of these made. Now, this one this is Micronesia and Polynesia still. This is Easter Island in Polynesia. And if you've ever I'm trying to think of some movies that there's tons of them that use the Easter Island heads as like a motif. I think like the Ben Stiller Disney movie Night at the Museum, there's an Easter Island head there that's a big figure, and then even like cartoons like SpongeBob even have Easter Island heads, but it's probably not this one, the one that you're remembering. But this is actually the more realistic Easter Island heads that we see on Easter Island. The Moai stone figures represent ancestors who have taken on spiritual power, and they overlook their own platforms that overlook small settlements and sort of guard and protect them. This is a Hawaiian umakala. I think that's how you say it, umakala. They eliminate the extraneous body details and usually have a powerful stance like this of a female figure. So this figure here, these figures, they are more for protection, to embody strength and power. And while the women of these tribes are beautiful, that's not what we're trying to depict here. It's more about the power, the strength, the even the parts of the figure here that are exaggerated, like the strong like legs and like calf muscles and arms and like triceps. Everything here is embodiment of like strong power. It's not about being dainty or being feminine. It's more about embodying a sense of power. This is the Maori meeting house. It brings together a lot of art forms. It's used for extended family gatherings and ancestor honoring rituals. This symbolized the ancestors' presence, with the relief sculpture that's seen in the red here, and the abstract figures that represent other ancestors that we see all around here. Inside, kind of similar, a lot of relief cutting, and then also curving non-representational patterns being painted along the tops of the beams there. In Australia, humans are present here over 40,000 years ago. The Aboriginals are semi-nomadic hunter-gatherers, and they seem to have a very strong time between what humans believe as humans and nature in dream time. This is a bark painting done in this like dot style is what you would call it. I used to have a project called like the Australian Dreamscape Project, where I would actually have you create one of these yourself. But essentially, these are just lots of dots like put up beside of one another to create sort of like an abstract scene or like genre painting. But yeah, this is very common, and honestly, it has not changed a whole lot since then. This is I don't have the year listed here, but probably hundreds of years ago. Alrighty, lastly, we're going to talk about the art of the Americas. So this is our map for this, if you'd like to look back on it. We're going to talk mostly, it's both Americas, so we'll talk about like the North America and all the tribes there, and then we'll talk about Mesoamerica and then some South America as well. So I'm going to kind of divide this into different like tribes or groups and sort of where they were located as far as the map goes. The Hopewell culture, which was in modern day Ohio, it is known for these large, and I'm also going to kind of talk as like what these places were, or what these groups were mostly known for, or like what they sort of focused in. The Hopewell culture is known for these large burial mounds. It's later called the Adena culture, but this is the Great Serpent Mound created around 1070 CE. This is similar to like our burial grounds that we, like the stupas and all of that, but they just have the ground. Actually, they sculpt the ground in a way to make these like raised mounds in the earth. So if you've ever looked at like earthworks, and we probably will here, in the next lesson or so, but earthworks are, artwork that is made from the earth, and this is a really early example of that. Also, something to note, many Native American artists today are making traditional works still. The works that they were making thousands of years or hundreds of years ago, not thousands of years ago, hundreds of years ago, is still the type of artwork that we're making today, because they just honor and want to keep alive these traditions that have been alive for hundreds of years, instead of trying to just make the next thing and like do something new and different. They are more interested in embodying and keeping these strong traditions alive. The Plains Indians, this is Matotope or Four Bears. They're known for their buffalo hide paintings, such as this one, but later on, something to note about this one too, they think about time as being more of a cycle than linear, and that's why this is not shown from left to right. It's more so just like in the realm or in the circle of things. When the arrival of like the European settlers happens, there's a high impact on the hide paintings. We see a decline in buffalo, which led the warriors to seek other services to use. This is Howling Wolf, a person from, or a Native American from this time period of like around 1864. They started to depict like actual like battles between the Native Americans and the U.S. military. This is Howling Wolf's depiction of at the Sand Creek Massacre, a event that he witnessed in 1864, and then painted it 10 years later. You can see this is actually maybe done just like on lined paper, though. It's kind of interesting. The Navajo of Arizona are very resourceful weavers. This is a second phase chief blanket, primarily worn by a chief because of how expensive it was and how just valuable the materials were that were made from it. It was made on a loom. It's nearly waterproof, and it was just very, very costly. And so we know this was reserved for a chief. The Pueblo peoples are best known for their pottery. Traditionally, pottery is done by women here. And this pot that we see is made from local earthenware. It's called a coma pot, and it is shaped without the use of a wheel. The abstract symbols refer to forces of nature or community life. So oftentimes these abstract patterns that we see are in reference to something like a leaf or a plant or a flower, and it's, an abstracted, like patterned version of it. In the Pacific Northwest, we have basket weavers. That's really what they're known for. In the Pacific Coast, they weave so tightly they could hold water in these baskets, which is really, really impressive for the materials they were using, which were like, grasses and things like that. And art is passed down maternally here. In the Pacific Northwest, we also see the use of totem poles that are dedicated to mythology. The Tlingit community house shows this totem pole that has all these abstracted animal shapes on it to symbolize, the owl might symbolize something, or the eagle might symbolize something, and so on. But again, it's kind of like the house post that we saw earlier on in like the African example there that was called a house post and not a totem pole. In Mesoamerica, the Olmec culture near today's Mexico City is the city. It's the city of Teotihuacan. Teo, we'll say the city of Teo. This is the Pyramid of the Sun. It's among the largest pyramids in the world, and it sits over a deep cave. It's aligned to face the sun on August 12th, and that is the first day of the Mayan calendar. The Mayan calendar really, really controls a lot of like how architecture is built, how these people live their lives. Really, they're very, very focused on the calendar. On the other side of the Pyramid of the Sun, we see the Temple of the Feathered Serpent. It's opposite of the Pyramid of the Sun, and the reliefed heads are of the storm gods here. In Mayan culture, we have hundreds of stone temples at Tikal. Temple 1 is a 200-foot pyramid with a temple at the top, and the walls and roof are richly carved and painted. Although this is still very, very large, this is fairly smaller to this one that we see here, the Pyramid of the Sun, but there's a lot more of these. The Aztecs, their artistic style sums up the preceding styles. Their art is about human sacrifices at pyramids, honoring both storm gods and war gods. This is the vessel of the feathered serpent cube for sacrificial offerings, and it's typical of Aztecs art's menacing aspects. The Incas, they're very skillful at shaping and fitting stone. This royal retreat center of Machu Picchu, where modern day Peru is a location or a city that was built to escape Spanish detection. The Spanish never thought that somebody could actually find refuge in the mountains as this because it was so challenging to build there. But they were such skillful stone masonry, people that they were able to make their city up on one of these mountains. In South America, we have the Nazca people. They make these really interesting, I don't know why I keep doing that, these really interesting like sculptures, I guess, earthworks from a bird's eye view. They use this geometric lines and patterns in the sand and create perfectly straight lines for miles and miles. And this is supposed to be like the depiction of a hummingbird. And then lastly, this is a Kara cup. It's one of the few surviving Inca art forms today. It's carved and painted for ancient rituals. The flat pattern is used for stylistic descendants of pottery and textile design. You can tell this is like this flat geometric style here is very much that of like the textiles, and just like the wooden, shape that we have here that's being carved is very telling of the pottery as well. And that is all for this this lesson. Sorry that was so long. That was the majority of our history, though, from all non-European countries that we'll see. In lesson 17, we'll go over the art of the Renaissance and the Baroque period. So check that out in lesson 17, and I'll see you soon.